Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Your Space Family Space session, dealing with the ups and downs with Paulo Perez and with Katie Rinker. Paulo's from McMaster, and Katie is from Linwood Charlton Center. The first part of the session is going to be Paulo sharing his portion, and then about halfway through, we'll switch over to Katie, but don't hesitate to ask your questions throughout, and we'll hand things over to Paulo so he can get us started. Hello, Paulo, and thank you.
Hello, hope everybody can hear me. This is my first time doing this, so this is really cool, and I'm having a little bit of technology anxiety, but I'm sure Haruka and Louise will help us through. Believe everybody can see the slides. We're talking about dealing with ups and downs and very much about emotions. And so wanted to talk a little bit about what we know about emotions. And emotions are these things that we can all, most of us can relate to experiencing, and we feel like we kind of get what emotions are because, well, we've experienced them all our lives, but they're actually pretty complex. And thinking about mental health and well-being, emotions are very central to some of the problems and some of the ways that are important to think about coping with stresses in our lives. And so I wanted to review a few things about emotions. First of all, they're necessary for our survival. And it's going to sound corny, but I'll often say feelings are our friends. It does not mean we like to experience all the emotions that we have. However, every single emotion has a role in our lives, and sometimes it's not easy to tell what it is that we're experiencing or what our kids are experiencing, because we also have things that are kind of like mixed emotional states, which we'll touch on a little bit more. Emotions motivate us and prepare us for action. So think about crossing the street, and whether or not you looked both ways, all of a sudden you hear a car racing towards you. Thank goodness we experience that emotion of fear that's going to very quickly propel us to get out of the way of the car. And so sometimes when people come for treatment, they think the goal is to stop experiencing a particular emotion. We wouldn't want that, because emotions are really kind of central and important for our survival. They provide information about the world. So certainly think about our five senses, which very much kind of give us information about things that are going on. And our senses also kind of like feed us information that then gives us particular emotional responses. Think about times in your life where you've been around someone that you love, and you're having a nice interaction, what that feels like. Or when you're with someone who's a little grouchy and a little grumpy, and what that feels like inside your own body, right? And so sometimes we pick up on vibes. And I can think of kids, sometimes saying, well, this teacher, for example, tends to yell a lot. She's never yelled at me. But I can tell by the demeanor that, it's kind of like sets me off a little bit too, and then I start to feel a little bit anxious. So emotions are these things that, we experience and give us our information to ourselves, but also are ways that we kind of communicate with others. And we can think about picking vibes off of other people sometimes, and like sensing other people's moods. We know very much that emotions are the boss of the brain. Well, what does that mean? It means that emotions are a very automatic response, and sometimes we think we have a lot more control over emotions than we actually do, because emotions, particularly kind of with particular triggers, are set off very, very quickly, and they kind of like take over. And emotions can get big really fast, and the actions associated with those emotions can happen very quickly. Emotions also come before language. Think about infants who can't speak. They're definitely experiencing emotions. Sometimes we can't tell what it is, what they want, what is it that they need, what is it that they're experiencing. But those kind of neural pathways are kind of solidifying over time, and from a very early age, we as caregivers are trying to sense what it is this baby's experiencing, because they're definitely experiencing something, and oftentimes they'll try to let us know kind of what it is without use of language. We know emotions come like waves. They can get very, very intense, but normally they don't stay intense for too long. For some people, they dissipate more quickly than for others, because we know that people can differ in terms of their sensitivity, how quickly they experience emotion, and how much time it takes for them to recover. We know that emotions happen in context. What does that mean? Well, that means even our physical well-being. Like if I'm really, really tired, and this often happens to me at night, I'm a little bit more cranky and maybe a little bit more prone to anger and prone to irritation, prone to feeling anxious. So there's something about my physical health context, but there's also like, what is it that's going on around me in terms of, what's happening and what are the noises and what are people saying and what, who's talking to me right now. And we know that for mental illness in particular, that one of the problems is emotion avoidance. So really trying very much to squash and not experience particular unpleasant emotions is kind of like an implicit goal. It's not necessarily what we would say out loud we're trying to do, but most of us don't want to experience unpleasant emotion for too long. And it's important, looking at this iceberg, just as a reminder that, all of us, we see each other's behavior. Maybe we can tell from body language, and depending on how well you know someone, you can maybe kind of, and based on what they're saying, maybe based on the context, you might be able to, guess what somebody is experiencing emotionally. Some people wear their hearts on their sleeve. Some people, you can't really tell what it is that they're experiencing. And they may have much more kind of not very much emotional expression. That doesn't mean they're not experiencing emotions, and that the emotions can still be very, very intense, even though you're not necessarily reading them on their face. So part for each of us as humans, it's trying to get in tune with our emotional experience. What is it that's happening for us? Because emotions can be quite buried, just as you see in this iceberg under the water, but also emotions, other people's emotions can feel buried from us, where we don't really know what's going on. But they can definitely very much carry a lot of weight in the same way that this iceberg is quite big, and they can run deep. Thinking about the different parts of emotions, because again, this speaks to how complex emotions can be. All of our emotions, and particularly when they're more intense, we can notice these kinds of things. We see kind of what it does in our body. So we can all relate to fear and having more of a racing heart and being a bit more sweaty, for example, and our tummies feeling a little bit different. With sadness, maybe we feel kind of heavier. With anger, maybe we feel kind of like more energized, and our bodies kind of like tense all over. And so each emotion has something that is experienced in the body, and also kind of an urge. It's kind of like in the same way that we have a hunger drive and we're like, I'm really hungry right now. I think I need food. The same is true for emotions. When we experience these emotions, they're communicating something that we need, and sometimes that urge, and depending on the intensity of the emotion, happens, the action happens really quickly. So if I'm really scared, I might run away from that thing I'm scared about. So my urge is to run and hide. If I'm sad, maybe I'm going to reach out, for a hug. If I'm angry, then I'm going to let someone know that something wasn't okay. I'm going to defend my boundary. And so understanding kind of what each emotion brings is important, especially as caregivers for children, trying to figure out what is the emotion that's happening and how can I help meet the need. So if my child is feeling fear, they need to feel safe. If they're feeling sad, they need some comfort. If they're angry, they don't necessarily need comfort, but maybe what they need is for someone to say, yeah, that was not okay. Reminds me of when I went to my boss yesterday and I said, my computer's not working. How do you expect me to do any work? I wasn't angry. I was definitely very irritated and frustrated. And my boss said, that's not okay. Your computer should be able, I know, like, you've had this problem for days. We have to do something about it. Let me make a call to so-and-so. For me, that made a difference. So moving along, in terms of emotions and development. One of the things I think that's important to keep in mind is as we grow older, as kids grow older, they become more and more in tune with what it is they're experiencing. And especially in developing language, they get tuned in, they start to notice what they're experiencing and start to label their experience. And as caregivers, that's something that, we can contribute to, is helping to notice and to label their emotional experiences. We also know over the course of time, even though there are shared experiences that we all have, we also have very unique experiences. And the experiences we have over time very much shape the kinds of emotions that we experience more often, and the emotions that are okay to express or not express. So, it could be, for example, that, in my family, I was raised that it's not okay to be angry. So every time, that I express anger, it's kind of like, nope, it's not okay to be angry about that. Even though anger, like every other emotion, is natural to experience, I might think, okay, I'm not allowed to express anger. Not think, it's just kind of something that I learn over time. And so maybe I don't express anger so much because over time I've learned that that's not okay to express anger, for example. We know that people differ in sensitivity in terms of how deeply they feel emotion and how quickly they react to certain situations. And we know that children often need teaching on how to regulate emotions. This is probably going to sound silly, but if you think about sometimes when we're dealing with children and adolescents, and this sometimes even happens with adolescents, we see big bodies and we think you're old enough, you should know better. And this is going to sound silly, but would we say to an infant, stop crying, you should know better? We probably wouldn't. It's just kind of like this raw nerve that's kind of like expressing itself. And of course, we have our own distress associated with that. Like, how do I help this situation? And even in adolescence, the same thing happens. So we learn different ways to kind of regulate our emotions, and oftentimes by seeing how others regulate their emotions, we learn how to regulate our emotions. And sometimes, particularly if we experience a lot of painful and pleasant emotions, we need some skills in order to be able to help ourselves modulate our emotional experience. But the you should know better doesn't actually really, because emotions are just so primary and so primal. And this is kind of what I wanted to get at kind of in this slide. This is hopefully helpful to look at. But the human brain, we actually share a large part of the underside of our brain. So this is kind of like the cortex, kind of the things that kind of are a bit more invisible under those colored lobes are kind of like parts of the brain we share with the animal kingdom. And here's the thing. The part of the brain that reacts very quickly to emotion is under there. And that's the part, if you see here on the slide, that when it gets activated very quickly and very, very fast. And it's actually the thinking part of our brain, the parts that kind of make us a bit more human, that actually take a little bit longer to kick in. And when the emotional part of the brain is activated, sometimes it kind of like blocks the thinking part of the brain. And so that's why we're like, well, you should know better. It's like, well, now that my emotion's activated, what I actually need is for my emotion to come down a little bit so that I can actually like listen to reason and be able to reason and problem solve. So when emotions get really big really quickly, that kind of older part of the brain that we share with animals, with other animals, really can, yes, important for us to do what we're going to do what we have to do in a particular situation, but unfortunately can make us look like we are acting irrationally. And so sometimes, and I think you may have heard this model, but sometimes it's kind of like, well, I got to choose the right camera angle. Let's do this hand. So if this is our brain and this is the top part of our brain, sometimes we will teach, for example, younger kids that when emotions get really, really big, it's kind of like they're flipping their lid. So it's kind of like that top part of the brain where they can do some thinking and reasoning and logic. Kind of that ability feels like it goes away because this emotion part has kind of like taken over, right? So it takes like time and skills and teaching and coaching from caregivers to be able to like calm that a little bit so then we can do some like thinking and problem solving. So what we know about kind of mental illness is that problem behaviors are often as a result of So problem behaviors, what are problem behaviors? So it could be things like self-harm, running away, swearing, using substances that are really negatively affecting mental and physical health. Those problem behaviors are often connected to unpleasant emotions and trying to not experience those unpleasant emotions. Again, so things like anger and shame and sadness and fear are all very natural to experience, but when we feel like we're experiencing those much more and we're feeling miserable in life, that's when we try to find ways to kind of squash those emotions. And so sometimes we talk about problem behaviors as ineffective solutions to intensely painful emotions, because emotions can be painful. Think about it. When you're kind of, really upset about something, really sad, like, we don't want that to last for too long. And it won't. It'll eventually kind of go away even on its own if we like ride that wave of emotion. But we sometimes get really stuck on just trying not to feel that way. And you can't blame people for not wanting to feel a certain way, particularly when they have an unpleasant, painful emotion that they feel they're experiencing much more than other people, and it makes life really hard. So in part through types of therapy, for example, what we try to do is we teach individuals to deal with their emotions. So understand your emotional experience. How do we help you to be less vulnerable to your emotions kind of like going up and down? So things like, can't be overstated, things like, healthy eating and sleeping habits and, not using mood-altering drugs, all those things have a role in how vulnerable we are to our emotions kind of going up and down. And how do we help decrease, one of the skills that, some of the skills that we can teach, for example, how do we help decrease emotional suffering, which is ultimately coping with those emotions that we're experiencing, trying to reduce the discomfort and trying to replace through skills, through doing new activities, for example, through being able to talk about our emotions. How do we change our emotional experience? And then for caregivers who are trying to support young people with emotional struggles, one of the things that's really important that we teach caregivers are what we call validation skills. And we know that when people have flipped their lid, that if we go in and we communicate to them in a very non-judgmental way, that what they're experiencing makes sense. Doesn't mean that if there's a problem behavior, like I'm angry and so I hit that person. Well, no, hitting's not okay. Makes sense that you're angry given this situation because this happened and that happened. Makes sense that you'd be angry. Not okay that you're hurting people, but makes sense that you're angry. Those validation skills actually help kids tune into their emotional experience, feel connected and feel supported. And so validation very much is, because it can be quite hard to see that kernel of truth in that person's experience. But if we believe that emotions are communicating important things, even though someone's emotional experience may not make complete sense to us right now, it's a clue to us, okay, if they're experiencing this and I don't get it, I need to get it. And that's where caregivers could do their part, trying to understand a child's emotional experience and use validation skills. So I'm going to end my part just by pointing you to some resources for parents. So Dan Siegel's book, The Whole Brain Child, is there. And also 3 books that I have recommended around helping children and adolescents who experience intense emotions, as well as, so there definitely some skills there and some good strategies for parents, as well as a great book called The Power of Validation. And I will also point out that there is a website, their Mental Health Foundations, that has some videos that caregivers, I think, could find really, really helpful. And that particular link is on parent coaching of emotion. So that's it for my part.
Thank you, Paulo. I know that there's one of the questions that's in the question and comment box, it's been highlighted in pink there.
Yes.
And I know that that's a common one I hear from families when it's not just kind of like a blow up or a meltdown, when it's kind of more drawn out. How do you do that?
It's a good question. Yeah, so I'm seeing it when an emotion kind of like lasts days at a time. Boy, that's a lot of emotional suffering. It can be really frustrating for a loved one to be able to support. Why does this happen? That's a really good question. I guess I would wonder about the age of the child or the adolescent. I would wonder about what it is that's kind of like triggering this emotional pain, and if it needs to be further understood by the young person themselves, first and foremost, and also by the caregiver, because we try to help, we try to validate, we try to give space, but if it's not changing, I think that's a clue that maybe there's something more that needs to be understood. Um, yeah, so I think that's us, or at least that needs to be, when I say understood, I might also mean like even like professionally assessed. So, like obviously I don't know the particular situation, but the fact that it can like last days at a time, um, and that it doesn't feel like what the caregiver does is making a difference makes me think, oh, maybe it needs to be further assessed. The other thing I would say is, as a caregiver, even though you might think you're not being effective, I've tried to validate, I've tried to give space, all of those efforts are not lost. The fact that you are trying is hugely important for this young person. It's really communicating, love and support and efforts. And sometimes we think, well, we got to get it in order to help. Sure, yes, ultimately, wouldn't that be nice? But just your effort is showing, oh, this person is doing their best for me. They're not doing the right thing still, because I don't even know what the right thing is. I don't even know what I need right now. But the fact that they're doing something communicates something very important to that young person.
Thank you, Paulo. Another question just came in about how do I help avoid meltdowns? I guess that's as much about prevention as it is about kind of getting to the other side of one.
Yeah. So avoiding meltdowns wouldn't that be nice? That's being proactive, and I think avoiding meltdowns would be, number one, accepting that you ultimately can't avoid all of it. You want to definitely try and like minimize it, and trying to minimize possible meltdowns is probably trying to understand what are those triggers. What are those things that have my child be more emotionally vulnerable? So things like, and parents will say, well, he's not sleeping well, for example, or he's not eating well. Well, those things are definitely going to make the child much more vulnerable for to have what you're calling meltdowns. So one, of course, if we can understand what the triggers are, that's great. So then we can try and avoid the triggers when possible, or purposely work on experiencing some of those triggers and using some skills. So now I'm getting into like treatment stuff. But the other thing is trying to avoid or helping the child to biologically be less vulnerable to experience big changes in emotion by doing good physical health stuff like sleeping and eating.
Thank you so much, Paulo. I don't see any other fresh questions in there, but if people still do have questions, don't hesitate to post them. We'll move on over to Katie's portion, and there's, of course, more opportunities to continue, and you'll maybe be able to see some of the connections with what Katie is sharing and how you might be able to kind of support your child through a meltdown and your own self, as well as ways that it might help with some of the prevention too. Thank you, Paulo. Okay, and over to you, Katie. Double check, Katie, your microphone's on? There we go. Okay, over to Katie, occupational therapist at Linwood Charlton Center.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for making time for us this evening. And you should thank yourselves too, because it is really hard. It's 8 o'clock on a Tuesday. It's a school night. I know it's not easy to make this happen. So thanks for joining us. And thanks, Paulo, for a great overview. And hopefully we can pick up and just starting on those ideas of what it's like to be a caregiver and a parent of a child who experiences those ups and downs and those feelings that we just went through. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, and we're going to talk about what are some things that you can do to take care of yourself, because being a parent and caregiver is the most important job, and it is the most important job for that little person in your life, or might be a bigger person, but they're still your children, and they need you. So here we go. Oh, I have to click on this. Perfect. So just to start by saying, you know what, ups and downs are a typical part of all of our days, especially as parents or caregivers. You know, come 8 o'clock in the morning, you've probably been on a roller coaster of every feeling out there. So we all experience these changes in our mood from day to day and throughout our day. And sometimes those downs are more manageable than others. And I think that was the question that was just asked was a great example of that, right? Sometimes we get that feeling, we identify that feeling, and we can think about how we're going to process that and move forward from it, and our day can kind of turn around. And there are those other times where we have a harder time to do that. So I think what we're going to focus on are maybe some of those downs that are a little bit more manageable and some of those preventive strategies that we can do for ourselves to help us to get through them. The analogy that I like, this whole idea of we need to put our oxygen mask on before we can get the mask onto our children. So taking care of yourself is really important. If I can get any buy-in for as to why it is most important for you to take care of yourself is because how you manage your feelings is going to lay the foundation for your children to do the same thing. So we know that if we can role model some of these moments of taking care of myself, our children are watching us, our adolescents are watching, and hopefully they can start picking up some of these healthy habits that can help them throughout their days as well. It's important to not lose sight of who you are. You are important, and what you need is very important. So I think that's kind of everything here. The other piece that I just want to put out there and to validate for everybody is I know that you as parents and caregivers, you want the best for your kids. That's why we're all here. So please, step one in doing that is making sure that you are okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about this whole idea of what is self-care, what are some things I can do? But before we jump right into it, I was hoping to just get a little bit of a sense of how people are feeling about that, what people best describe themselves when it comes to self-care. So A would be, I practice it daily. B is, I practice it at least once a week. C, it's important, but I just can't find the time. D, sounds great. When am I supposed to squeeze it in? And E, yeah, right. Who has time for that? I'll just give a few minutes. Okay, so it's looking like we can go on. So, a lot of people are, oh, great. The 40% who are saying I practice it daily, I would really encourage if you could even share in your comments and questions section some of the strategies that you're doing already and how you're practicing it daily, because that would be great to share with everybody else. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we're kind of a mixed board. Yeah, who has time for that? True. Hopefully tonight we're going to talk about some strategies that are kind of quick and we can talk about carving out the time for it. But I would really like the people who are saying that they are practicing it to please share some examples of how they're practicing it. And it's great to see that people are recognizing how this is important. So here we go. We'll talk about some and I'll focus on the ones that who has time for. So here are the different strategies that we're going to go through one by one. There's deep breathing, some positive self-talk, mindfulness, getting exercise. Paulo, that's what you're just getting into, right? That healthy lifestyle, healthy eating, healthy sleeping. So that's all going to come into that portion. Some progressive muscle relaxation, an enjoyable activity, taking a break. Oh, great. The strategies are coming in. That's perfect, too. So I'll make sure that I go over those. Now, when I'm saying taking a break, I'm not saying, call your travel agent tomorrow and get on the beach. That would be lovely. And I wish that is how we could all take a break. But take a break might even look as small as, you've got your kid into camp in the summer and you have a U day. And it is not a day to do laundry or to do grocery shopping or to clean your house. It is a U day to drive down to Bayfront, take a bus over to Bayfront, and go for a walk. It is a day to crack open that book that you might not get to the end of for months from now. Let's just do it in that little break of you time. The first strategy that we're going to go over is the idea of deep breathing. So we know that when we take some deep breaths, it helps our mind and our body to just relax and calm. Often when you're stressed, right, and we were talking about that emotion of fear, and Paulo had this example in there, you start to breathe more heavily and it quickens, it gets fast, your muscles start to tense up. So when we can think about taking a few intentional deep breaths, we can kind of interrupt some of that takeover that our brain is trying to do. So this is an example called box breathing. It's pretty simple. We can do it anytime, anywhere. You do not need to be looking at a box. But I'm going to try this. Here we go. Okay, here we go. So we would start down here in the corner of this box, and you would take a deep, a deep breath in for 4 seconds. So then you would hold the breath for 4 seconds, and take a big breath out for 4. And hold that emptiness for 4 seconds. So I'm just going to move my cursor around, and we can just practice this one time around. For all intents and purposes, we're going to practice it one time. But usually we would say to practice 4 times, going around. This is something you do sitting on the bus on the way to work in the morning, or on your walk to school with the kids, or while you're staring at that pile of dishes that never seem to get done. Taking 5 deep breaths is not going to make any of that worse. So it's not going to make the pile of dishes get taller, is what I mean by that. You can make time for this if possible. So here we go. And big breath in. Oh, here, you know what? I'm wanting to be mindful of some all over here. I'm learning how to do this thing just as you guys are too. We're back to that deep breath. My anxiety is taking over in this moment, and my feelings of worry. So let me just see, there was a challenge here, and I want to address that because it's really important. As much as I'd like to practice some forms of self-care, I generally don't have time. Being responsible for my loved ones as well as other family, hard. and I think to sit in that and to realize, like, yeah, this is hard to find me time. What I'm hoping to kind of share back out there is, let's find one little thing that we can just try to squish in amongst getting everyone's food on the table and getting the groceries done and making sure you're at work so you can have money to support your family. Like, it's a lot. But I think if we can find one thing that we can kind of sneak in there, it's really important. You are important. Another is mindfulness. So mindfulness is a strategy to help us to bring our minds to the right here and the right now. It helps to get away from all that thinking of, oh, I have all these things to do tonight, and I'm so worried about how this is going to play out. What if? Or to get away from that thinking of, I can't believe I just did that. How could I possibly do that? What are they going to think about me? That thinking just keeps going and going, and it takes away from our ability to be present in the here and now. I mean, how many of you got onto this webinar and you're like, how'd that even happen? I'm just here, right? You made it through your night somehow, but we weren't actually mindful about what was going on and where we were and how we were feeling. Was around us, because we just got caught up in all those other types of unhelpful thinking. So mindfulness is a type of skill that you can practice really anywhere at any time, which is the great news about it. So I'm going to lead you through a sample mindfulness activity called describing. Let's fall into that category. I would invite you to grab anything around you right now. I have a pillow. So I am going to mindfully describe what this is. And I shouldn't have said it with a pillow, because that's the first thing, is I'm not allowed to say what it is. I need to talk about what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like. And I'm going to do an example of that right now. So I have a rather rectangular shaped item. It's soft and squishy. It makes some crinkly noise. There are different colors on it. There's blue, white. There's some different geometrical shapes across it. You really want to take a moment to just kind of study it and to be present in what it is that you have picked up in your hand. What color is that piece of laundry that you're just mindlessly throwing into the laundry? Or all those dishes, how many dishes you have to do? What does that water even feel like on your hand? How soapy, how many bubbles were going in there? Right? Those are opportunities to be really mindful and just pull your attention to what it is that you are doing and how you are doing it. And just slow some of that thinking down. When you're walking, you probably walk the same route every single day. But did you notice that any of the flowers are up? It's spring. Did you notice the new buzz? Did you notice a new bird's nest that's being made? So really trying to tune into where you are and what's going on around you is really quite important. Exercise. Exercise is a great self-care strategy. One, it's a way to kind of remove yourself from some of those stressful situations, right? Like getting out of the house, just be able to take those moments to go for a quick walk or get yourself to the gym or take the stairs. We're so fortunate in Hamilton to have all these stairs around us that we can climb. So it doesn't have to cost us a lot of money to be doing exercising. But exercise releases these great chemicals in our body, endorphins, and they have great uppers, natural uppers that just make us feel good. An opportunity, I saw somebody writing, is going for walks with friends. So it's an opportunity too to do it with somebody else and to have some moments to be with others and to just kind of escape from the day-to-day challenges that are going on for you. In Hamilton, for some of your teens, actually, Louise, I don't have this in here, but if we could even find the link for that, it's for our mood walks. And mood walks are amazing opportunities. We didn't, Linwood's doing them for teens, but I know there are even some adult mood walks too across the city. And it's just an opportunity for a group of people. You meet up. They're usually about once a month or twice a month, and just to get to explore our great city and the different trails that we have, and being in nature, being outside, moving, and having some opportunities to be with others are great. Some people mentioned that they like to do some yoga. There's some other strategies that people have shared. I'll go back to those too, but great examples. At work, I take my breaks as actual breaks sometimes. You know, you're meant to get that 15-minute break and you never do because you're just so caught up on what it was that was happening. But I've been more mindful of setting a timer on my phone for that break time where I just go out and I do 2 laps around. We have another building close to us, so I say to myself, I have to get around here twice and then I'll come back. And that's a great way of just breaking up my day and having that moment to notice the new things going around outside and to get that physical activity. So progressive muscle relaxation, this is a skill that we can use to teach our body what it means to relax. So often, we're so stressed that we're walking around just kind of like tension all over our bodies, and we might not even notice it. And we might not even notice, our body might not know what it feels like to not be like that because it's just become so automatic and trained. So progressive muscle relaxation is a type of script. I have a link here, but I'll walk you through a little example of one that intentionally asks you to focus your mind on different parts and muscle groups in your body to alternate between tensing them and relaxing them. So some people find this really helpful strategy to fall asleep at night, to help that body just get out of the state from here to back down. Actually, going back to exercise, that's another great benefit of exercise is it can help us sleep as well, because when we teach our bodies to actually physically exhaust itself during the day, it can make sleeping for us. But PMR, yeah, if we do it before bed, can be helpful. This is a more tricky one. This isn't one that we can really do, while sitting on the bus or traveling in our car, because it is more helpful to be able to do it when we are in a more quiet and comfortable place. But it's certainly worth trying where you are. So Anxiety Canada has a slew of resources that are pretty easily accessible for children and caregivers and adolescents as well. So I would really encourage you to check out their website, but they have on there some free scripts and that help walk you through the different parts of our body. Usually they start at the head and end at your toes, and we scrunch different muscles come together. So I'm going to give you a quick little example of what that could look like. So to begin, if you could sit comfortably with your arms just kind of resting by your sides, you can do it with your eyes open or eyes shut. I can't see you, so feel free to do however you would like. So to start, we're going to tuck our neck into our shoulders. And when we talk about this with kids, we say tuck like a little scared turtle. Kind of put your head in. Your muscles are going to feel tight but not sore. Hold this position for 15 seconds. Notice the pull in your neck muscles and how uncomfortable this feels. Our bodies are not meant to hold this position. Our bodies prefer to feel calm and relaxed. So slowly let your shoulders drop down and relax your head. And roll your head around. Let that stiffness just melt away. Leaving your head, neck, and shoulders. So we would do that also for about 3 times. And then we would move to our hands. Pretend that you're squeezing a lemon so tightly to get all that juice out and really hold it. And then release it. And notice that difference, how that difference feels from one that was so tightly squished together to now when we're a bit more relaxed. Is the video one that kids can watch or follow? Is a good question. So we have these. So the Anxiety Canada site does not have videos, but you could YouTube a progressive muscle relaxation for kids, and maybe even Louise, another like tomorrow night at the office, I could find one that would be like appropriate for kids. Maybe we could email it out to people and anonymously, like no one would know one another's emails, but that could be a way that we could check out some more kid-friendly actual visuals. I think that could be great. Enjoyable activities. This is where you get to be back to you. You are important. There were things that you did get to do once upon a time. And taking moments with them. I saw someone even saying I get a chance to just have some time alone in the shower. That's where you go to escape. You know, we have a picture of a bathtub. Like, that's great. And recognizing this is my time. I can take those extra minutes to really get the shampoo in there today. That's important. Cracking open that book. Cooking, not because you feel so much pressure to have your children eating the most nutritious meals in the world, but because you actually enjoy cooking. Right? You enjoy getting to flavor different or taste different flavors and mixing different things together. That's important. So think about what are those things that I really like to do: going for a bike ride, calling a friend, going out to a movie with a friend, finding some of those and choosing. Maybe even it's just once a month that you get to do that, but you can look forward to doing it. So if we were to take a look at some of the strategies that we had just chatted about, in any or people who are already practicing. So I think some of the things that people were commenting on, I didn't get a chance to go right through them, but would fall into some of these categories already. So just kind of thinking about what could I try here? What might seem a bit doable for me? A lot of people are feeling that deep breathing. And that's such a portable skill. Like, you know, you can really use it wherever you are, whenever you're there. That's excellent. The mindfulness, right? Even to challenge yourself tomorrow morning to try it, right? Get through your routine mindfully. Could be helpful. Excellent. So it seems like somebody's going to think that they can try some of these. That's wonderful. So now the last thing I'm going to leave you with is this whole idea of let's commit to it. Let's be specific and let's do it. So once you've chosen one of your strategies, which you just did, and feel comfortable trying it, I want you to commit to it. Repetition of the plan is going to eventually become automatic thought for you. It's going to become habitual. So if we can just make it happen more routinely, it's going to become just part of our lives, which is great. So think about, you can even grab a piece of paper right now, or if you're sitting beside somebody, say this out loud to them. Say, you know, I'm going to try X, deep breathing, every morning when I arrive at work, or every morning when I'm sitting in the car and the 3 kids behind me, and I'm going to take my deep breath, or my 5 deep breaths. That's specific where you're going to do it, how long you're going to do it for, and who will be there. So maybe it's that you're going to take that break at work and you're going to invite someone to come with you, or at night you're going to take the dog, or you're going to take a kid. And when you're at the park, you're going to enjoy your coffee and actually drink your coffee mindfully. So take just a few seconds if you want to put this as your commitment to yourself. You are worth it. Okay, so do we have any mindfulness works at our house? Great. Sitting down for 5. Can people, sorry, Louise, are people able to see the questions and comments that we see?
So everything that's in the questions and comments box that actually says questions and comments at the top, that's, everyone can see that. Where individual people are typing in their questions, they have their own little box where they only see their own questions.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So people can see these awesome examples that are being shared then.
Yes.
Great.
And if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them in. We've got a few minutes left. We can sit tight while you think of them. Actually, there is a comment that was posted earlier that might be something that either you, Katie, or you, Paulo, might find that you're able to respond to. I'll just post that here now. Okay, so that comment's posted down there in the questions and comments box about it being hard to notice my emotions before I get caught up. And I guess that's the family perspective, wondering about how they kind of check in with their own selves before they go to support their child.
Well, Paula, you can totally jump in because I'm my first thought is going back to you're kind of teaching with us tonight about this whole idea of they are so automatic, those feelings, and then we get caught up in them so quickly and we react before we even have a chance to be like, oh, that's how I was feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I hope everybody can hear me. I think so. First is I would say to like be compassionate with yourself. We have that same brain. We're also going to be activated. The fact that you're able to make that comment of it's hard for me to notice my before I get caught up is already a good sign that you are noticing that. And I would say that sometimes because our emotions can happen so quickly, one of the skills that we want to develop is that mindful awareness of our emotions. And so it's totally okay to not respond right away and to be kind of like, I just need to step back for a second. And that's really hard to do in situations that feel like it's a crisis where emotions are like really running high. But actually to take a few seconds or to say, I'm trying to think of another word, I just need to kind of take a moment for myself. Just a minute and I'll be back. And my boss did this the other day with me. I was telling her something that she was, where I was a little bit emotional and she was listening and she goes, and she was chewing and she said, okay, I'm still processing this. I'm thinking. And I said, yeah, but because it was so, the conversation was a little bit more emotional. Even she recognized that she couldn't even settle herself to think through her response. So she was able to say out loud, I need a moment. It's like, that's totally okay. Being able to say I need a moment is better than not saying that and just kind of going completely silent, for example, because that other person is trying to interpret your behavior, but it's totally okay to take a moment.
That's terrific. I just see the response says, thanks, Paulo, for that. Let me just make sure we're not missing any other questions there. Someone did ask a question about the recording resources and things like that are going to be made available in the next day or two, and you will get a follow-up email that includes the link to that resource page where there will be links to the recording of this session. And if you have any follow-up questions, if you happen to watch the recording later, you can certainly email us and we'll do our best to follow up. And just one more little check to see if any more questions or comments are posted. Oh, we've got someone has shared a suggestion as well about setting boundaries with the people that are around us, and that's certainly something as well that's part of that awareness, I guess, that awareness of ourselves and knowing our limits and knowing when we need to take a moment and step away, perhaps. So thank you, everyone, for all the sharing that you did tonight. And oh, there's another comment that's coming in there, Haruka. I'll let you pop that into the shared comment box. That's a great one. Everyone really did share a lot, and we really appreciate that. That's the kind of conversation that we hope that you find helpful as well. And Paulo and Katie, thank you so much for your time and for what you shared with families tonight. And we really look forward to more opportunities in the not too distant future, I hope. And right now, we do have some other sessions that are in the process of getting booked for May for youth and for families. And there was a session that had been scheduled on April 11th that has been reposted for June the 10th. And so that is available right now for anyone to sign up for. And that's on validation. And that was something certainly that Paulo talked tonight, and so that's an entire session talking about that and being able to help with regulating emotions. So definitely check that out. It's on the website as well, and we'll make sure everyone has those links. Thank you, Haruka. And there's that lovely comment as well about someone having the pleasure of working with Katie and utilizing some of the suggestions that she shared, and that they've really helped, which is wonderful. Strengthening relationships with validation. Thank you, Haruka. I couldn't remember the title for the June session. But anyway, thank you, everyone. Any last comments from Paulo, you, or Katie?
No, it's been a pleasure for us to do this with you.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much for inviting us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, everyone, do take care tonight, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you. Good night.